Good morning, everybody. It's good seeing the familiar names and faces of those that I actually have known for many years and value in so many ways. I apologize in advance for the voice. There's a few reasons for it. One is it's my morning voice. Until I start using it and warm up those vocal cords, they seem to get kind of scratchy. But then also, I kind of lost a little bit of my voice on Thursday. So, trying to overtalk teenagers. So, those that have teenagers know how difficult that can be. Anyway, today is Saturday, June 27th, 2020. Today's live stream, we are going to be talking about the different type of spiritual abilities. I touched base on this a little bit on one of the prior sessions. And when I touched base on it in that session, it was kind of high overview, talking about the various levels of media abilities, such as, the top tier, so to speak, being a shaman. And then under shaman, there is people communication, animal communication, and then earth communication, the world, our physical world, and sensing what's going on in the world and that kind of thing. And then underneath those, especially for the people communication, you have the various types of abilities that go along. So this one specifically is going to be talking about those various types of abilities because there's so many labels out there, and we're going to talk a little bit about them. It's like, what do they mean, and why are there so many? In all honesty, it's because some people only have access to specific channels of communication, and so to identify that channel, it comes up with a title, a name, a label, so to speak. So, and it doesn't mean that that person can't have access to all the other channels. They absolutely can. It just takes practice and time. But what they can do is specifically access that one channel or maybe two channels. So these are going to be the different types of channels. The way that I label them underneath people communication, which is kind of across the board as well for animals as well as the earth, is under two groups. One is energy channeling, and one is medium channeling. So I'm going to break these down a little bit more in detail. So as I go along, if you have questions, I will be able to notice them and address them. Hopefully my voice doesn't go out too much during this, because this will be the first time I'm talking for an hour straight since the boys cost me my voice on Thursday. Anyhow, so energy channeling, what is that? So the general term energy channeling, it's basically the ability to communicate with energy. Those that have energy channeling, they typically have signs of mood swings, feeling exhausted in a second, never feeling rested, have high anxiety, have high claustrophobia issues, have excess eating patterns, have mystery aches and pains that are undiagnosed. Now, obviously, you guys know I do manifest release as well, and some of those mystery aches and pains could be contributed to structural, but there is the aspect of the spiritual side. Tends to, people who have energy channeling tend to have medical diagnoses that don't get better with medicine, of ADHD, bipolar, and schizophrenia. And the reason I say do not get better with medicine is, even though I personally believe, but it's not proven, it's not founded at this point in time, that 99% of the people out there that are diagnosed with those three particular disorders are channeling. They're communicating still with the spirit side. There is that 1% due to structural issues, physical traumas, emotional traumas, etc., that could create these types of diagnoses as well, due to the function of the brain and how it's being put under pressure, so to speak. So I don't want to say it's 100% that, but For those that are diagnosed with these things and medicine is not helping, then chances are you're still channeling. So you need to seek out assistance for checking the ability to channel still, but then also seek out assistance to check for some structural issues through a myofascial release therapist. So hit both on both sides. As you guys know, I try to incorporate it all because I believe in mind, body, soul, and those all get affected. So energy channeling, what are those labels? The most common one you guys hear me talk about are empathic and energy sensitive. Empathic energy abilities is the ability to feel, whether it's physically or emotionally, somebody else's issues, their pains, their excitement, whatever it is, whether the person's alive or dead. We're all energy. Everything in the world is energy. So energy is constantly communicating with us if we let it communicate. And a lot of us do it on a subconscious level, taking in energy. But then there's those that have an ability to actually communicate with that energy. So an empath feels the person sitting next to them, their knee pain. They may feel the person sitting next to them, their sadness, because they might be sad that day over something they've experienced. Most empathics who don't have the ability under control don't realize that this is happening. And so they internalize it as their own knee pain, as their own sadness, as their own, super excitedness, super giddiness, super high energy, super high anxiety. Same goes for those that are dead that are around you. It's energy. So if there's a spirit next to you that died from a heart attack, you might feel like you're having heart attack symptoms all day, every day. It's just one of the energy abilities. Energy sensitive is the ability to sense energy from a good or bad perspective or a neutral perspective. You're not really picking up on any kind of pain, any kind of sadness, any kind of information other than you instantly know this person is safe or this person is good. You instantly know walking into a building if the place is safe, if it's bad. It's just that instant reading of negative or positive energy from a person or a place. The other one that a lot of people have touched base within is energy medicine. And this is the ability to heal using empathic energy, astral energy, mental energy, or spiritual energy. And within the energy medicine, you have this is very rare and very difficult unless you have it practice. So, which I usually put those at the end, but this popped up. Psychic surgeries. That's the ability to remove disease or disorder within the body tissue via an energetic incision. You pull it out, the bad energy, the gunk, the disease, and then that energy incision instantly heals because you don't want energy pouring out. I know that's kind of like a weird one that not a lot of people have heard of, or those that heard of it may not believe in it. And this is a high ability, which takes a lot of practice. And I would say that the people that do it the most are those that would be practicing shamanism pretty much every day, all day. Even some Reiki high-level practitioners, high-level masters, they have the abilities to kind of do that as well. But you also got to remember that this is twofold when talking about psychic surgeries. Psychic surgeries also involves dealing with the physical body. And so energetically, you could pull stuff out and you can get the gunk out and you could do this. But sometimes the physical body as well needs to have physical healing, such as myofascial release. So, because otherwise the negative energy is going to keep getting trapped there. The body's still going to respond the way that it is, and it's going to constantly come back. So it's twofold when talking about psychic surgeries. The most common under energy medicine is chakra balancing, which, you know, a lot of people have heard about. A lot of people have tried it. A lot of people like it. And when you balance your chakras within, then it helps create a more balanced, I would say more like attitude about day-to-day life and situations. When your heart chakra is off, whether it's too fast, you're giving out too much, whether it's too slow, you're not letting anything in. And so each chakra within our body has its own frequency that resonates within the energy of ourselves, mostly ourselves, but then also with the world around us, physically and spiritually. The other energy medicine is out of body healing. The out of body healing is the ability to push somebody back into their bodies. We've all heard about having an out of body experience, getting checked out. You know, it's part of our body and our soul's natural defense mechanism to deal with trauma. We check out, right? When somebody says we check out, we're kind of leaving our body a little bit. And when we leave our body, sometimes it's hard to come back into it because it's too painful. Whether it was a physical trauma or whether it was an emotional trauma, like losing somebody that you love very, very deeply. And so the person's having a hard time coming back in naturally because when we check out, our body knows we need it back. So we try to come back, but emotionally, the pain is too much. Whatever occurred, too much. So we tend to stay out of our body. The downside to that, our bodies don't heal. Our body creates problematic issues and dysfunction. Our body can't rest, which then can't heal. So in the end, the biggest issue is the healing. The very, very rare situations for energy channeling, which takes, again, an extreme amount of focus and processing and working it, is levitation, where the ability to float, whether an object or a person, by using spiritual energy means, which, like I said, not very common. It is very difficult to do that one. I can't do that one. I don't know anybody that can do that one. I have dreams that I can do that one, but I don't think I've ever physically done it. The other one is psychokinesis, or PK, which a lot of people have heard about that and usually hear it from a negative perspective because PK is usually brought on by high emotion states by somebody who has ability. And what it does is the ability to use the energy around you to move objects. So throwing things, picking things up, moving things, those kind of things. And when we hear about PK activity, it's usually something from a very negative perspective, like a horror movie or shows out there who have people come in to investigate and they talk about PK energy. Yes, it's uncontrolled because it's controlled by the person's emotions. So when that person gets those emotions under checks, under wraps, then the PK activity typically decreases and goes away altogether. There are some situations where the person's been doing it their entire life and the energy aspect has kind of taken on its own, I guess the best way to describe it is it doesn't have its own personality, because it was never living, but it's more of, it has its own vortex. So it has its own source energy. Now it doesn't need the person to deal with those emotional issues. It can now pull energy from the environment and continue the same cycle and pattern that has been brought into the space. So it seems like it has its own aspects and personality, but it really doesn't. It's just repeating that same pattern. The other one that is rare is pyrokinesis. This is the ability to create fire with your mind and control that. I have never met anybody who has that ability, but supposedly in history there has been. So I'm not dismissing it, but it's very rare. Another one that people have is apportation. And that's the ability to cause objects to disappear, reappear, and teleport to different locations. Again, very rare. I haven't met anybody who does that, but I know that does exist as well. So the other aspect of groups of labels is mediumship channeling. And so that's the ability to communicate with spirits, not just the energy. Signs of knowing whether or not you have mediumship channeling is knowing something before it happens. Thinking of a song and then it plays on the radio. Thinking of a movie that maybe you haven't seen in forever, pops in your mind and starts playing on TV. People who have night terrors are communicating. People with high anxiety, some of the same symptoms of those that are energy channeling. High claustrophobia issues, excess eating, feeling exhausted, never feeling rested, muscle aches and pains. Diagnoses are the same that don't get better with medicine. ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenia. They all partly contribute as well and could be the cause of these medical diagnoses. And one day, that is my goal, to prove the existence of that. So when it comes to medium channeling, there's quite a bit here. And this is where it starts to get a little bit more confusing because of the amount of terms and labels. So you have the clairs, and it's the aspects of, and as I go through them, you'll understand what I mean, but like clear consciousness, which is the ability to know things without ever knowing the topic. So in some ways, always knowing that a certain song is going to play, always knowing this, maybe even the lyrics to a song you've never heard, or a movie you've never seen, but know everything about that movie. It's a sense of knowing a topic that you've never had witness or experience in the physical form. Then there's clairaudience, the ability to hear a sound, whether it's distant or unseen. Sometimes, like for those especially that are learning to open their abilities, like when I did, the first time that happened to me was hearing like chit chat in the room, as if I'm in a room full of people, not making out what they're saying, but just that noise. You can make out that they're words, but you can't make out what the words are. That is an example of the label clairaudience. Then you have clairvoyance, which a lot of people have heard of. Clairvoyance is the remote viewing or remote sensing of something. So it's the ability to see something at a distant or an unseen target somewhere way off. Underneath clairvoyance, you have precognitive and you have retrocognitive. Precognitive is the ability to see the future. Retro is the ability to see in the past. You also have clairsentience, which is the ability to feel past the physical world and feel within the spirit world or other dimensions. And that kind of goes hand in hand with energy, being energy channeling as well. There's also clairgustance, which is the ability to taste something that is not there. And so when you taste something, you're like, oh, I don't know why I taste metal, or I don't know why I taste anesthesia stuff. Now, some of that could be a trauma that you had, especially if it was just after, like, let's say the anesthesia, like just after surgery. That's still in our system, even though we don't really realize it. So sometimes we can taste that from a physical perspective. But there are people who sense by taste in spirit world, in medium communication. And then there's tongue-tied, sorry, clairescence. And that's the ability to smell what's not there. So I know happens to me all the time. And whenever I'm around somebody, I always say, do you smell this? Because I'm smelling it. And so that's just what they're calling it. Then there's I'm tongue again. This is what happens. Psychometry. And this is where someone who uses more than one ability to get the information. So as you're channeling, you might get some of those clairs. You might get something else. You might get energy channeling, all connecting into one. So it's the ability to have more than one channel open. So I'm getting multiple layers. The other aspect is telepathy. We've all heard of this one, the ability to transmit or receive thoughts. Now, this one can be challenging because when somebody thinks of telepathic communication, they think literally like there are people that are just communicating with their minds. And that can and does happen. It's hard to do because it just is fit from a physical perspective, but there are some levels where telepathy aspects occur, such as on a subconscious or an emotional connection, which is more common. And this is where we hear about twins that know what each other's thinking or feeling. Parent to children, grandparent to children that have a very strong emotional connection to these people. And so they get a sense telepathically, so to speak, as to what may be happening to them or what they're feeling or what they're thinking. Then there's the mind-to-mind communication, which is very difficult from a physical perspective, and it's called intuitional. From a spirit perspective, it's just spirit guides talking to one person, spirit guides talking to the other person, and the two of them, because they can listen to spiritual connection and to have spiritual channeling, mediumship channeling, they're hearing the same messages. They're not communicating to each other. They're communicating through the spirit world to each other. Then you have what they call intellectual communication. And that's where you get in a blink of an eye information to each other. That is so rare. I never experienced it myself. At least I don't think I have. And I've never met anybody that's done that. Then there's also telepathic communication with animals. So that bridges over to the animal communications as well. There's also medical intuitive or medical psychic. Some people have heard that term. It's the ability to know what is medically wrong with somebody. They may know nothing about the person. They may not see the physical symptoms, outwardly. But they know. They know what is medically wrong. And that's just part of communication. Then there's those that can read auras. They see the colors around people, projecting the auras that they're projecting out, and able to tell the person what that aura looks like. Once you know what that aura looks like, then you can look it up and see what the color is supposed to represent. But I would suggest anybody that does do aura readings, don't even worry about that. Connect to the aura and then finish the connection and just say what you need to say about that color, about that aura, about what that person's going through. The most interesting channeling abilities that are rare prior to, I want to say 2018, 2017, is abilities that I've recently learned, which is a gateway ability. In the gateway ability, and this is the worst ability to have, honestly. There are two types of gateways. Some people have both. It's becoming more and more common when babies are born nowadays to have this ability open. And when I talk about it, you'll understand why it's so terrible. So the two different type of gateways is an energy gateway, which means the spirit passes through the person, and both gateways come from the back, about the mid cavity of the chest, and pass through the person's back, through their chest and their sternum, and then continue into the world. When the person passes through and starts going into the world from an energy gateway perspective, they're just stealing a little bit of the person's energy to move on. And it gives them basically like their own walking spiritual pathway. So they don't have to use as much energy to get where they need to be or where they want to go. Or maybe even use it to affect people in the physical world, which is the biggest reason spirits will take energy. To either cause problems, to move something, to facilitate something, to change something, whatever the case is. So when they come through and they steal that person's energy, that doesn't sound like a very bad deal. But if it's happening all day, every day, the person no longer has the energy they need for day-to-day life. And they're just exhausted all the time. And they just are not okay. They tend to have a lot of breathing issues. They tend to have a lot of back and mid-back and chest issues. They can tend to feel like they're having heart attacks all the time, but yet, they test you and you're not having heart attacks, but you have heart attack symptoms all the time. That is them passing through that cavity and just taking from you. So very painful, very exhausting, very overwhelming. The second gateway, which is worse than that one, is what is called a sin gateway. And what that means is the same thing. They pass through the same way. But when they pass through, they leave their sins at the door. And they do this because they feel that the sins that they have stop them from going to do their transition, which we talked about in another video. When they have guilt over what they perceive to be sin, then when they pass away, they're afraid or intimidated to go do their transition, to learn what they have to do in life, in the afterlife, so to speak. So they find people that are sin gateways, and when they pass through them, they leave the sins at the door. It seems like, okay, well, what's the big deal about that? You're helping somebody else out on the other side. The problem with that, you have the same issues that you would have as an energy gateway, but now you're also feeling guilty about things you've never done ever in your life, like beating somebody up. You've never done it. Why do you have feeling guilty about it? Why do you feel like you're going to be judged for that if you've never done it? And it's because the spirit has passed through, left that in you, and moved on so they could feel better. Again, a pretty cool ability, a very terrible one as well. So when you hold on to it and it gets stuck in there, then you have all this guilt, all this sadness, all this problematic energy you can't get rid of. And that could very well lead to suicide, addictions, internal pain, like non-stop internal pain, because it's just coming through and getting stuck. The most important thing about that is it needs to be closed, honestly, or at least tampered down. The problem with that is kids don't necessarily understand it, especially little kids. So it's not until you're an adult that you can understand really what's happening and then control it to allow the ability to stay open and yet close it when you need to. And there are specific stones that the spirit world has told me people with this kind of ability need to wear around their neck to help diminish what's happening. So anybody watching that, if you tend to have some of these issues or you're just not sure, reach out to Mind, Body, Soul Wellness Center, either through email or make an appointment, and we could talk about it and see what's going on. But this is one of the worst ones to have because it just takes a huge toll on the body. This is also one of the main reasons that little kids will check out of their bodies to allow things to pass through all the time, because then they're just sidestepping a little bit and allowing the spirits to come through and take what they need. The kids that are doing this, especially the young kids that maybe can't verbalize it, that they're doing this to somebody, tend to never sleep. And it's because they can't sleep. They're not in their body. So they're constantly awake. So they need to be pushed back into their bodies. But why are they coming out of it? Is it because of the gateway issue? Is it because they're astral projecting all the time? Or is there some kind of physical aspect? So if you have a small child that never sleeps, reach out to us. I guarantee we'll be able to tell you what's going on. Something I have worked with and something I have assisted with. The other sign of this when it comes to small children is when you're calling your child's name over and over and over and over again, and the child is not responding. Yes, you can contribute that the child's not paying attention. But when they're really little, they're going to respond to noises. So if they're not responding to your voice, your tone, no matter what you're saying, no matter what you're doing, and they're just blankly staring off in the distance, or their back's to you and doesn't even turn to look at you, if there is a spirit that is passing through or a spirit that's in their body, and you're not calling the right name, so you're not getting a response. So those are some signs of gateways. And if you have a child that has those symptoms, reach out to us. We can tell you what kind of stones you need. Small children, obviously, to wear around the neck is not recommended. I would not put a necklace around a child's neck. But you could put stones in between the mattress and the box spring, or taped on the underside of the bed, where the child's chest cavity would be. So then at least while sleeping, the child is not utilizing these abilities and making it stronger and continuing down that process. That's, like I said, one of the worst ones to have. So the other abilities that you guys have probably heard incorporate both medium and energy channeling. The biggest one we've all heard about is astral projecting. That is where we're leaving our bodies to be in the spirit world or the energetic world, because Earth still has its own energy field, and we're not necessarily going into a spiritual dimension when we're astral projecting, but we're in the world. I know I did it last night, and it reminds me I have to reach out to the person that I astral projected to. But when our soul leaves our body and we enter into the energy fields, we can then move around all we want. And that's part of both energy channeling as well as medium. And the reason that this is under both is because you're accessing the energy to do that. And then mediumship channeling is because 9 times out of 10, you're also going into the spirit world and having conversations with the spirits. The downside is when you come back to your body, you tend to forget whatever it is that you learned. It's the great forgetting when we come back to our bodies. Another one is automatic writing. You've seen this probably in movies or shows where someone's just sitting there and they're drawing and words start to come out or pictures start to be drawn and all that. That's an example of automatic writing. That's automatic writing with medium channeling because they're processing that information. When it's not, and it's strictly just energy and not medium channeling, then that's where, more likely than not, as you're drawing or circling or writing, certain feeling words will come up because energy is typically feeling versus knowing and communication that way. The other one is dowsing, which is locating water. People who do this particular ability, they usually use dowsing rods and they go around trying to find where water might be. Native Americans especially rely upon the senses to find water, especially, back in the day when water was not very convenient in modern times. People in the desert, they need to find water, so they'll use communication through energy sensitivity as well as channeling spirits to find the proper place to look for water. The last one that is the most common label is intuition. We all have it. Some of us have it extremely strong, and they're using both energy channeling as well as medium channeling to activate that intuition. And then there's people who that's all they ever have left on, is intuition. So even somebody who is totally like, no, 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 doesn't happen. This isn't going to happen. None of this is the case. No spiritual activity. There's no way this is the case. We'll get intuition, that sense that something's wrong with somebody, that sense of, don't go outside today, and then find out that, if they did, there would have been a problem, So intuition is the most common and easily the easiest one to maintain and stay connected from birth. So when those that their abilities naturally shut down around 4 or 5 years old for most kids, intuition is the only one that tends to stay on in general. So those are the abilities generally used. Now, there are some other ones thrown out there because maybe they didn't like the label of intuition. So they might say medical intuition, or injury intuition, or ground intuition. In the end, it's still all intuition. It's just they feel more connected to that word. And the thing is when it comes to labels, we need them so that way people understand what we're talking about. But that also gives us that sense of, from an intellectual perspective, that it fills in some gaps for us. But know that nobody is wrong when they're putting out labels about stuff. Even though I know this can be a debate for some people. Because even like somebody who says, that the sky is not called the sky, it's called space, that's not necessarily wrong. It's just how that person kind of looks at it because of the way that they want to use that label. So at the same time, labels can be hurtful. Labels can be harmful. So I hate personally using labels to describe anything, but yet at the same time, I need to use something that people know. So, perception. Okay, that's a good one. I was just looking at comments. So, that one just popped in. Perception. So, perception would be an ability that incorporates both mediumship and energy channeling. And the reason being is because perception can be looked at as an individual person's own perception, which is based upon, so this is a twofold thing, based upon our world, our culture, where we grew up, who our parents were, or who our caregivers were, because we then tend to take on our surroundings labels of idealism, whether they agree with somebody else's or not. But then spiritually, perception can get confusing because, and it's a great way to bring this in, as I was saying, I hate using labels too, because to me, when I see the energy isn't necessarily what others perceive that energy to look like or to be. But yet at the same time, it's the same thing. So for me, when it comes to perception, it's twofold. Physically, actually threefold. Mentally and emotionally. And then within the mental and emotional perspective, people with abilities incorporate empathic channeling as well as medium channeling. So that was a good one. I hope that answered the question. So tarot cards, are, for me, and the way I train people how to use tarot cards, it's just a distraction to get you out of your mind and get you to stay in your creative communication side, because thought kicks you out of your abilities 100%. And that's why some people who are, super, super logical, scientists, that kind of thing, they don't believe in the spirit world because they've never experienced anything to tell them or to allude that there is such a thing as communicating with spirits. They don't experience it because they're logically in thought all the time. And it's not until they can shift from right brain to or left brain to right brain and activate that communication or allow that communication to come through, then it seems like it's hogwash and it's stupid. But the thing is it goes the opposite way as well, because you have some people that are so right brain and so creative that they're very flighty, and it almost seems like they're a little bit crazy, but they're really not. They're just very communicating, and they're just without control. So it's like all day, every day, and the person's talking a mile a minute and sounds like gibberish, but in the end, it's just how that person is processing that information. So right brain, left brain. It's how I block them, is I think, to shut them out so I can have some peace. Because being open all the time, every day, all day, even though I'm always cracked open, but when that door swings open and I'm 100% in communicative mode, it's exhausting after a while. And it creates a lot of internal issues because you have to be in your body to heal. You have to shut it down, shut it off in some ways as well. All right, let's see what else we got. Any other questions? Yeah, I don't think the one's a question. So I'm not gonna bring that. I'm not gonna mention the one. It seems to be some random kind of comment. So, which makes complete nonsense. I don't understand it. And maybe just because I'm in spirit world, I just can't process what that is being asked. So that's abilities. That's abilities in a general breakdown. Obviously, we can go into each detail specifically more and more about those. But at this point, I don't see the need for them. If you come up with a label that you've never heard of or that you wonder, you can always email me. You can always comment it, and I will respond to it appropriately. Next Saturday is 4th of July weekend, so I'm going to not do a live stream, so that way those that are enjoying their time, that tend to like to watch this when it's happening, can enjoy family, safe practicing, because of COVID and everything that's going on. Still that's going on. That's a whole other conversation if you guys want to have that one. But the following week, I'm not sure what I want to do yet. I feel like I need to wait. So check your emails. If you're signed up for my emails, check on YouTube's subscription channel, and obviously those on Facebook and the other channels. I'll send a communication out of what that is. If you have specific requests you want something to talk about, send it to me. I can get it added to the rotation. All right, and before we stop, one question popped up in the screen. Can you get ability back once it's gone? Absolutely. Because we're all born with it, it is something that never fully goes away. Yes, it shuts down. Yes, it can be difficult at times to bring it back up and functioning. And the only difficulty with that is because of logical thought. Because again, if you're thinking, you're not communicating, which is why I never remember what I tell people. So if you constantly go down into a thought pattern and thought process, it will be very difficult to get it to open up again, but it's not impossible. It just takes practice. It takes practice, practice, practice. And it's the reason I use tarot cards, because it's a distraction. It's a visual distraction to get you out of your head and allow the spirits to communicate with you. So that's a great question, and absolutely. So for those of you with kids that have sensitivities, and a lot of this, abilities, things will probably make sense. They're never too young to start to learn to protect themselves. Obviously if they can't speak or think necessarily by giving instructions, they're a little too young, but that doesn't mean you can't do it for them. Then once they can start to process the information for themselves, then at that point they can learn to take control of it. And when they take control of it, then their lives get better, their lives get easier. They navigate the challenging world that our kids nowadays are having a hard time navigating, because they will block the energies that are negative, whether the person's alive or dead. Because anytime you take control of that, you're also pushing away negative people in your life that shouldn't be a part of it. You also avoid some of these diagnoses of mental disorders that are contributing to spiritual communication, which also means less meds, which also means the body can develop the way it's supposed to. There are some kids out there too who have the most interesting diagnoses of issues that they really shouldn't have for their age, but yet they do. And some of that is because of channeling, and so they're describing what they're feeling and not realizing it's a spiritual influence from an energy, empathic perspective. But then there's also those that have it because they're dealing with some past life issues still. So that's a form of medium channeling. And then there's those that have it because of true physical dysfunction, that if they get some myofascial release and they start to get some treatments and work done, a lot of those pains and issues can start to go away. So again, it's not just one thing. And I know a lot of times we expect things to be one thing. It's this or that. But what I've come to learn in just the past 15 years doing spiritual stuff, as well as in the past 5 years of doing myofascial release, it's all these things. It's everything. It's the mind. It's the body. It's the soul. And everything is contributing. Everything is bringing things to light. Everything is hurting more and more. So we need to treat all three things, not just one. All right, what time we got? 10:50. All right, I'm going to end early. Everybody have a safe and fun weekend. And like I said, next weekend there won't be one, no, at least not a live. I might put a video out, but not a live one. And then definitely not putting a live one out. And then the following Saturday, look for communication as to what it will be about. All right. Bye, everybody.